Jonathan Pierce's polished leather shoes clicked against the marble floor of the luxury shopping mall as he gripped his 8-year-old son's hand tighter, deliberately quickening their pace past the homeless woman huddled near the fountain. Perfected the art of not seeing the invisible people. The ones society had discarded, the ones who didn't belong in his carefully curated world of success and status. But then his son Michael stopped dead in his tracks, his small hand slipping from Jonathan's grasp. The boy's voice cut through the ambient noise of water fountains and distant conversations like a knife through silk. "Dad," Michael whispered. His eyes locked on the beggar's face with an expression of shock and recognition that made Jonathan's blood run cold.
Yes.
Time seemed to fracture in that moment, and Jonathan felt his entire world tilting on its axis as he slowly turned to look at the woman he'd just walked past without a second glance. The woman he'd dismissed as just another unfortunate statistic. The woman whose eyes were now meeting his with a mixture of shame, fear, and desperate hope. If you believe every person has a story worth hearing, and that compassion can bridge even the widest divides, please hit that like button and subscribe. 2 hopeful stories. Your support helps us share powerful narratives that challenge our perspectives and remind us of our shared humanity. Now, let me take you back to where this heartbreaking story truly began. 3 years earlier, Jonathan and Rebecca Pierce had been the perfect picture of success. He was a ruthless corporate lawyer who won cases others wouldn't touch. A dedicated elementary school teacher who believed in second chances and the goodness of people. Their marriage had been built on opposites attracting, but those same differences that once felt complementary had slowly become chasms too wide to bridge. Rebecca's compassion, which Jonathan had once found endearing, began to feel like naivety. His ambition, which she'd initially admired, started to look like greed. The arguments became more frequent, more vicious, each one chipping away at the foundation of what they'd built together. The final fracture came on a rainy Tuesday evening when Rebecca discovered that Jonathan had defended a pharmaceutical company she'd been protesting against, a company whose negligence had hurt children in their community. She'd looked at him with such disappointment, such profound disillusionment, and said the words that would echo in his mind for years. "I don't recognize the man you've become. Where did the person I married go?" Jonathan, exhausted from a brutal week of depositions and drowning in the pressure of maintaining their lifestyle, had said things he could never take back, cruel things about her idealism being childish, her salary being inadequate, her dreams being worthless compared to his achievements. Rebecca left that night with only a suitcase and their 5-year-old son Michael, moving into a modest apartment across town. The divorce was bitter and public, Jonathan using every legal maneuver he'd learned to fight for primary custody, not because he particularly wanted to be a full-time father, but because losing felt like failure, and Jonathan Pierce didn't fail. He painted Rebecca as unstable, emotional, unfit, using her passionate advocacy for social causes against her, twisting her compassion into evidence of poor judgment. He won, of course. He always won. Michael would live with him, and Rebecca would get supervised visitation every other weekend. What Jonathan didn't know was that Rebecca had already been struggling with depression, a darkness that had been creeping. In 4 years, exacerbated by their deteriorating marriage and the crushing weight of seeing the world's injustices daily in her classroom. Losing her son, the one pure thing in her life, pushed her over an edge she'd been teetering on for too long. She stopped showing up for her visitation days. She stopped answering phone calls. School reported she'd stopped coming to work. Within 6 months, Rebecca had vanished completely, and Jonathan told himself and everyone else that she'd abandoned her responsibilities, that she'd proven him right about her instability. They were better off without her chaos in their lives. But that wasn't the truth, and deep down beneath layers of ego and self-justification, Jonathan knew it. Rebecca hadn't abandoned McCall, she'd broken. The depression that had been manageable with support and love had spiraled into something consuming when she lost everything that mattered. She'd lost her apartment when she couldn't work, lost her friends when shame made her isolate, lost her identity when the medication she couldn't afford stopped working. The descent into homelessness isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a series of small catastrophes. Missed payments, burned bridges, days when getting out of bed feels impossible, until suddenly you're sleeping in your car, then in shelters, then on streets. And the person you used to be feels like a distant memory. Jonathan had hired a private investigator once. 6 months after she disappeared, more to cover his bases legally than out of genuine concern. The investigator found nothing, and Jonathan accepted that conclusion easily because it was convenient. He threw himself deeper into his work, hired a full-time nanny for Michael, convinced himself that his son was thriving in their penthouse apartment with its stunning views and endless material comforts. Michael had everything money could buy, the best schools, the finest clothes, every toy and gadget imaginable. What he didn't have was his mother's goodnight songs. Her patient explanations of why kindness mattered, her way of making him feel seen and valued for who he was, rather than what he achieved. Jonathan noticed his son becoming quieter, more withdrawn, but attributed it to normal development rather than grief. Now, standing in that upscale shopping mall with his son staring at a homeless woman, Jonathan felt the carefully constructed walls of his denial beginning to crumble. He looked at the woman properly for the first time, really looked, and beneath. The layers of dirt, the matted hair, the gaunt cheeks and hollow eyes. He saw her. Rebecca, his Rebecca. Except she wasn't his anymore. She was barely herself. A ghost of the vibrant woman who used to light up rooms with her laughter and challenge. Him to be better? Michael was already moving toward her, his small feet carrying him forward with a certainty that children possess when they recognize love. Even when it comes in unrecognizable packaging, Mom. Mom, he said again, softer this time, kneeling beside her with a tenderness that Jonathan had never taught him. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as she reached out with trembling, dirt-stained fingers to touch her son's face, as if confirming he was real. Michael, she whispered, her voice cracked from disuse and emotion. My baby, you've gotten so big. The shoppers around them were starting to stare, phones coming out, whispers spreading. And Jonathan felt the familiar urge to protect his reputation, to pull his son away, to pretend this wasn't happening. But then he saw the way Michael was looking at his mother, not with disgust or fear, but with pure, uncomplicated love, the kind of love Jonathan had forgotten existed. Something broke inside Jonathan in that moment. Some calcified piece of his heart that had been frozen since Rebecca left. He knelt down beside his son, ignoring the expensive suit that would be ruined by the dirty floor. And for the first time in 3 years, he really saw the consequences of his choices. Rebecca, he said, his voice thick with emotions he'd spent years suppressing what happened to you. She looked at him with eyes that held no anger, only exhaustion and resignation. I got lost, Jonathan. I lost our son, and then I lost myself, and I didn't know how to find the way back. The tears came then, not just from Rebecca, but from Jonathan too. Years of suppressed guilt and regret pouring out in that public space. He'd done this. His cruelty during the divorce, his need to win at any cost, his willingness to destroy her. Credibility, it had all contributed to breaking a woman who'd already been fragile. Michael, wise beyond his years in the way children of broken homes often are, took both their hands and held them together. Ow! Can Mom come home with us? He asked with the simple logic of a child who believed problems could be solved if people just decided to be kind. Jonathan could have said no. He could have called social services, made arrangements through proper channels, kept his distance and his dignity intact. But looking at his son's hopeful face and Rebecca's broken one, he realized that dignity meant nothing if you lost your humanity in the process of protecting it. Yes, he said, and watched something like hope flicker in Rebecca's eyes for the first time. The next weeks were harder than any courtroom battle Jonathan had ever fought. Rebecca needed medical care, therapy, treatment for the depression and trauma that had led to her downfall. She needed patience as she relearned how to exist in the world, how to trust that she deserved a roof over her head and food in her stomach. Jonathan hired the best doctors, cleared his schedule to drive her to appointments. Most importantly, listened when she finally found the words to explain what the past 3 years had been like. He learned about the nights she'd been assaulted. In shelters, the hunger that became so constant, it stopped feeling like pain. the shame that made her hide from anyone who might recognize her, the suicidal thoughts she'd fought daily. He learned that his investigator had actually found her once, had seen her in a shelter, and reported back to him. But Jonathan had dismissed the lead because the woman described seemed too far gone to be his ex-wife. That truth sat in his stomach. Like lead, he'd known where she was, and had chosen to look away. But he also learned about resilience, about Michael's visits that happened in ways he'd never authorized because his son would slip away to bring his mother food and blankets. The nanny, with his silence. He learned that love doesn't disappear just because someone becomes unrecognizable. That his son had been carrying the weight of his mother's loss alone, trying to be the bridge between two people who should never have let themselves drift so far apart. Slowly, impossibly, they began to rebuild not a marriage that was broken beyond repair, but a family. Rebecca moved into the guest house on Jonathan's property, giving her stability while maintaining boundaries. She returned to teaching part-time. When she was ready, finding purpose again in helping children who came from broken homes. Jonathan learned to check his ambition against his values, taking cases that aligned with justice rather than just profit. And Michael, beautiful Michael, got to have both his parents present, if not together, learning that families could look different and still be whole. The day Rebecca laughed for the first time since coming back, a real, genuine laugh at one of Michael's terrible jokes, Jonathan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but hope that maybe redemption was possible. That maybe kindness could heal what cruelty had broken. This powerful story reminds us that the people we walk past without seeing, the ones we dismiss as too broken or too far gone, are someone's mother, someone's father, someone's whole world. It challenges us to look with compassion at those society has made invisible, and to remember that any of us could be one tragedy away from falling through the cracks. If this story moved you, if it made you think twice about the humanity in every person you pass, please hit that like button and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. We need your support to keep sharing narratives that challenge us to be more compassionate, more aware, and more human. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and join a community that believes every person deserves to be seen. Thank you for watching. And remember, the next time you walk past someone in need, you might be walking past someone's entire world. Choose to see them. Choose kindness.